Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Again, thank you for your time. I know it's a weekend, Sunday afternoon, not so easy to join in, sparing your family time and stuff, but you did. So thank you for that. And thank you, Dr. Soni, for joining in for this. I'll introduce you in a very short moment. And of course, thank you, UVCT, for hosting us today. UVCT is a platform, web hosting platform who will you can do it for your webinar series is you just need to go on to UVCT, and if you're interested, please get in touch with me. I can put you through the admin team of UVCT. Using these calls on UVCT for yourselves. So that's about UVCT and the people I have to thank. Um, Okay, now let's go straight in. This is the APGI Virtual Series 2020, where this is the first one of its kind, because 2020 we were, I'll talk about it when I talk about the introduction of APGI. But the topic we have for today is role of Agile in shaping an innovation culture, which I think is really, really important for all of us to understand, because Agile is not just about speed, it is about speed in the right direction, right? So that is very important for us. And one is that. Second is the innovation should really happen. If not, there's no point in really, you've got a set of requirements, you've done that, and that's normal. But what you want to do is to have an environment, an environment set up for yourselves to innovate new things. Now, Dr. Soni will talk about those things today.
Sri,
Yeah.
Sri, your voice is breaking, and looks like you're away from the mic. Just
How about now?
better.
Okay, thanks, Murli. Thank you for the feedback. I'll hold on to it then. Okay, so yeah, I was just saying today's topic is role of Agile in shaping an innovation culture, and that's by Dr. Pavan Soni. Little flow of session today. I wouldn't like to call it as an agenda, because in Agile we don't have an agenda or a full-fledged plan, but what we have is a flow of session, flow of work. So I'd like to say, of course, welcome you all, which I did, and I'll touch upon who we are for the first time joiners for APGI. If you have joined our previous conferences face-to-face or webinar, that's fine. That's great. This is the little introduction about APGI, and then we move on to introducing Dr. Soni. And we've timed it in such a way that we probably take about 75 minutes in total. So hopefully we should be, done by 4:30, 4:45-ish IST. Okay, who are we? APGI, which stands for Agile Practitioners Group of India. In 2015, I was in Pune. Of course, I'm so sorry, I did not introduce myself. I'm Sri Harsha, one of the founders of APGI. And of course, there are two gentlemen whom you can see in this photo here. One with the blue T-shirt, and another person should be somewhere here with the kid. He is Vijay, and this guy is Manju. I don't know how many of them are already on call, and myself. So we three caught up in a webinar, in a meetup in Pune, and we said, okay, we'll have to start a group just to make sure that we spread Agile awareness across the globe. First India, first Pune, then India, then the globe. And that's how we started this group. And of course, it's a non-profit group. It's all run by our volunteers. And we did 3 annual conferences so far. And 2020, we had planned in the month of April, 17th and 18th, 2-day conferences. You all know what happened. And because of which we had to move it to next year, possibly, hopefully, for a face-to-face. But we still wanted to keep the ball rolling, and hence this virtual series. And Dr. Soni kindly agreed to kick us off for this series. So today is his session. As I said, this group is endorsed by Scrum Alliance, and we are looking forward for more partnerships with Agile Alliance and Scrum.inc, etc. So we have done 26 meetups so far, and we're still counting. Today is the 27th meetup. So if you're interested, of course, you can stay in touch with me or the other two, we can put you into our regular social channels, social media channels, for you to stay in touch and of course contribute in the world of Agile. So that's who we are. And at the moment, I am living in Scotland. I'm speaking to you from Edinburgh, and I'm here with a client, kind of doing their consulting and trying to transform their mindset more than the company process, etc., for agile ways of working. And of course, without further little about our speaker, which I could kind of really capture from the interactions that I've had with Dr. Soni. Dr. Soni is he's an innovation agilist or evangelist, I would say, by profession, and of course he's a teacher by passion, and he's a founder of Inflection Point, where they offer programs on design thinking, strategic acumen, and consulting services. He has also been invited about 5 times for speaking at TEDx, and he's a gold medalist from MBM Engineering College, Jodhpur. So, without much delay, Dr. Soni, over to you.
Thank you, Shri. Okay, so let me share my screen.
Sure.
Okay. So, welcome everyone. And so the topic for the discussion today is the role of Agile in shaping innovation culture. Now, many of you are quite aware of the Agile framework, the Agile methodology, but the intent would be to understand how agility mindset can also coexist with the innovation culture, which is the dominant interest area of mine. We'll keep it conversational, and I would want, instead of parking all the questions right towards the end, what might be useful is if you would like to ask me the questions along the journey, so that we can navigate the discussion accordingly. So feel free. The best way to ask your question is to type it on the chat box so that I can pick up the question and we can still have the flow of our conversation. So as Sri had introduced, I run this company called Inflection Point. I did my PhD in the space of innovation management from IIM Bangalore. Been in the industry for a very brief time. I teach at ISB Hyderabad, IIM Bangalore, and IIM Lucknow as a visiting faculty. I consult with leading organizations in the space of design thinking, innovation culture, and strategic acumen. I write quite avidly. So currently I'm authoring a book which is on design thinking, and it should be out anytime over the next 2 months. So pandemic gave me a chance to actually sit back at home and really focus on writing extensively, and that's something I really enjoy. Doing webinars also is a part and parcel of that, and I also engage with a lot of startups as a part of NSR cell in IIM Bangalore and the Founder Institute. These have been some of the organizations that I've had the privilege to engage with, and as we're talking right now, I'm ongoing with my engagements with companies like Flipkart, Asian Paints, Accenture, etc. And what I'm realizing is that some of the world's most innovative leading organizations are not really pedaling back on their investment. What might sound like is that organizations have frozen their investments on learning and development and training, but in some of the companies that doesn't seem to be the case. And I'm really happy to see all of you to invest on yourself on a Sunday, because this is a great opportunity to reinvent yourself. While you may be agile practitioners, there is not further any more value in doing the same work over and over again, or talking about the same stuff or meeting the same set of faces. So to that extent, I'm really happy that she took this chance of inviting me over. I'm a practitioner of, I'm not an agile practitioner, I'm a practitioner of something different, which is design thinking and innovation culture and strategy. And today's discussion would essentially be to bridge the two worlds and see where do we go from here. Agenda, I would like to start off by drawing the parallels and the differentials between Agile Manifesto and design thinking. What is Agile stating, how the two are aligned, and what are the points of differences. Then we talk about the tenets or the principles of innovation culture. And finally, I dovetail into how to develop empathy and creativity, in the sense that I would like to offer a very scientific methodical approach, if you will, so that you can start practicing some of those things onto your agenda. So that is what the overall charter is. And as I said before, I would not want to park all the questions towards the end, because it's best that, since we have a small audience here, it's best that some of these questions get addressed as we're talking right now. So if you have any question at the very outset, I'll be happy to take them. Anybody's having any question, you can unmute yourself, ask me a question, or you can type on the chat. I'm okay either ways. And if there is no question as such, I would be okay to start off with. Go ahead, please, if there is any question in terms of the agenda, or if there is any specific point which you would like me to focus on, I'll be happy to hear that as well.
Pavan, I think my point is so most of the folks from Agile Jobs and Coaching Rooms, so most of the people they know Agile Manifesto. So my point here is if you start from bottom to top, developing empathy and creativity, after that you can go another topics that I can say.
Okay, any other recommendation?
Hi Pawan, this is Yogesh here. I wanted to focus more on this design thinking and how it would help in this innovation and transformation.
Okay, focus on design thinking. All right. And customers in B2B contexts, Krishna is asking, what else?
This is Lakshmikant here.
Go ahead.
I really want to know what's actually tenets of innovation culture that actually interests me. Like Agile Manifesto, design thinking, empathy, creativity. This I would have seen a lot. Like something that you were mentioning very specifically, tenets of innovation culture. That's something that rings some bells in my mind.
Okay, fair enough. What else?
Yeah, hi. Organizational change management is an important facet of any organizational enterprise transformation. So it'll be great if you can also touch on that part and also how that basically ties back to the, because obviously we've got to move away from the hierarchical structure of the past. But so organizational change management, what ramifications it has on this change? If you can.
Okay, so change management I would cover as a part of the tenets of innovation culture. I'll touch upon that. Okay, what are the other points?
Yeah, and how, because many organizations use models like ADKAR, organizational change management model, that is. So how would that fit in, or how do you retrofit that? If you can cover something on that, we also good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a quick addition, Dr. Soni, something on MVP, because we keep hearing a lot about MVP, but a lot of people have varying definitions of MVP or a minimum viable experience. If you're coming up with a service kind of a product, and then how can we come up with a minimum viable experience rather than maybe just a minimum viable product? So sure. If you could highlight some aspect there.
That's a good point. Okay.
Dr. Soni, good afternoon. Good to host you on this APGI platform. I have one small request. If you can cover innovation in legacy products in Agile world. So typically a platform where how to inculcate the innovation culture, where people are working on legacy products, where there is a very leeway. And second option is if you can touch base on innovation in security aspects, or where you say security in different terms, not in terms of product security or something. It's more of a domain where we operate in mobility or railways, and so where there people security is important. Safety and security, I would put it in this term. So if you can touch base on that particular point, how we can think of.
Yeah, so just to keep in mind that I have just about an hour with me and counting. So we would have to draw some boundaries, but wherever I can touch upon some of these topics, I would. And as I said before, also, we'll keep it fairly conversational. So I'll impress more upon things that excite you, and your excitement should be gauged by the questions that you ask or if you respond to my questions. Fair enough. Moving on, this is the parallel between design thinking and Agile Manifesto. I've been asked a lot of times that is design thinking really different from Agile? Answer is absolutely yes. Are there some commonalities? Answer is again very much yes. So these are the commonalities between Agile Manifesto and design thinking. And I'll also tell you what are the fundamental differences between the two. So while Agile talks about individuals and interactions, it manifests in terms of empathy and customer centricity in the realm of design thinking. Agile talks about the working software. We emphasize a lot on prototypes and experimentation when it comes to design thinking. Agile speaks about customer collaboration, which translates into visualization and co-creation as far as design thinking goes. And since the whole idea is to respond to changes in a very rapid fashion, in the world of design thinking, we call this as rapid iteration. So many people have asked me also this question, that is design thinking old wine in new bottle? The answer is no, it is not an old wine in new bottle. There are some very important things that design thinking brings to fore, which is typically not available in traditional ways of thinking. And to really bring home that particular point, I would like to show one slide to you. This was not a slide which I had initially planned for, but I'm glad we are having this discussion here. So let me very quickly pull that slide up. I didn't plan for that slide, but then some of these questions really made me do so. So here's a slide which would offer a significant amount of clarity to all of you in terms of what is the unique position of design thinking. Okay, so all right. So here we are in terms of, so Agile has this model that all of you are absolutely familiar with, and on the right hand side is a model of design thinking. The model of design thinking essentially comprises of these 5 stages: inspire, empathize and define, ideate, prototype and test and scale. Let me quickly spend a minute discussing with you this very critical model of design thinking. So the term design thinking was coined by David Kelly in the year 2004. He started this company called IDEO, which is one of the foremost design thinking organizations in the world. And he started this company in the year 1978. And in 2004, he, along with a couple of other folks at Stanford, started the Stanford D School, D with a small d. Vishal Sikka was a protege of Stanford University where he did his PhD. And when he came to India, and of course, when he became the CEO of Infosys, he ushered this whole revolution of design thinking. But then 2 of the institutes that really stand out when it comes to design thinking is IDEO and the Stanford D School. So this model is something which I practice quite extensively when it comes to design thinking. It all starts off with inspiration, which is to set the agenda for why do we need to have design thinking. And inspiration can come from 2 sources. One is aspiration and second is desperation. And I strongly believe that if leaders fail to set that ball rolling as far as design thinking is concerned, it doesn't crack. Empathize and define is the heart of design thinking, where you're trying to understand that you are, listen to this carefully, you are not solving a problem for somebody, you are solving a problem with somebody. That's a very fundamental difference. You're not solving a problem for somebody, but you're solving a problem with somebody. And when we talk about this critical aspect of design thinking, we also emphasize on the point that when you talk to customers, a customer can bombard you with lots of wishful thinking, like what happened right now, isn't it? We had a lot of wishful thinking, but cognizant of the fact that we have only 60 minutes. And me as a resource person has to define very clearly the boundary conditions, what I can entertain, what I cannot entertain. And for several other things, obviously we can have a follow-up session or I can leave you with my email address. So that's defined. Then we do the ideation bit. Prototyping, testing is very critical, and finally whatever happens has to be scaled. So if I really look at the commonality between design thinking and the agile model, some of the things which are quite common include the emphasis on prototyping and testing, the very significance of defining. But where the two things really span out in terms of significant differences is empathizing. Agile starts with requirements, and then you run with those requirements, but not necessarily the requirements are number one stated. Number two, the requirements are really a reflection of what customer desires. So the difference between the two could be that Agile might start with needs and wants, whereas design thinking starts often with desire. One of the fundamental premise of Agile could be, you are the better judge, of course, I'm an outsider to the domain, but could be that the customer knows what she wants or she is able to articulate what she wants, but that is not the premise that design thinking starts off with. Also in design thinking, we really focus a lot on the ideation bit. So if I look at, again, the design thinking process, whether the Agile process, Agile would start perhaps with ideas, whereas in design thinking, ideas is not the starting point. Ideas right in the middle is where they come. So once again, going back to the real unique contribution that design thinking brings to table is this. This can be perhaps the most important slide that you would see today, perhaps the most important, and it would invite obviously a bit amount of discussion and debate, in which I'll be very happy to engage with you. So look at this 2x2 matrix. On the y-axis, you have the problem, which could be known versus unknown problem. And on the x-axis, you have a solution, which could be known versus unknown solution. Now, what I mean by known problem, a problem which is known essentially talks about, are you reasonably aware of the root causes of the problem? Is it a wicked problem or is it a tenable problem? If it's a tenable problem, we call this as a known problem. If it's a wicked problem, here's an example of wicked problem. How do we ensure that coronavirus does not spread in India anymore? It's a very, very good example of unknown problem, because you do not really know why it's happening at the first place. Is it happening because of people? Is it happening because of food? Is it happening because of weather or some natural reason or maybe some cosmic reason? Who knows that? On the x-axis, you have the solutions. Now, the solutions can again be of two categories, known solutions versus unknown solutions. What I mean by known solutions is that you know the range of solutions which are available with you. Whereas unknown solutions, you're not even known of the range of solutions. There could be infinite number of solutions. So if the problem and the solution are reasonably well known, we are in the realm of lean thinking. Lean thinking talks about agile, that can squarely, if I look at this diagram, that can squarely go into lean thinking, because I know what I'm supposed to do. I have to do it faster. I have to reduce my cost of doing it. So cheaper, faster, better is what lean thinking would give you. Six Sigma go into that quadrant, which is lean thinking quadrant. If I go to critical thinking, I do not know what the problem is. But if I could go to the root cause of the problem, I would very well know how to solve it. Now, this might sound a little counterintuitive to you, that how can I have a problem which is not known, but a solution which is known? There are two methods that we use in critical thinking. One is called TOC. TOC stands for Theory of Constraints. And the second model is called TRIZ, T-R-I-Z. Couple of you may be aware of TRIZ, but for those who are not, TRIZ stands for Theory of Inventive Problem Solving, which is the Russian technique of problem solving, which essentially reduces a problem into what we call as a physical contradiction. And through a 40 by 40 TRIZ matrix, you are essentially solving those physical contradictions. A very exciting thing. But both TOC and TRIZ offers you a bouquet of solutions to choose from, provided you are able to understand the problem. If I go on to a situation where the problem is known, but the solutions are not so known, we go to Edward de Bono's lateral thinking methods. So lateral thinking, six thinking hats, blue ocean strategy, all come under the ambit of Scamper. All are lateral thinking techniques. But the most wicked, the most thorny problems that we deal with, where both the solutions and the problem are not well known, falls under the ambit of design thinking. So some of the problems which I have sort of engaged with in the last couple of months now with various of my ongoing engagements includes problems around how do we ensure creativity when people are working from home. We talked about productivity, we talked about employee engagement, but creativity is a different beast altogether. So that is a realm of design thinking. Similarly, how do we ensure that the suppliers and the partners remain invested in the creation of an ecosystem for new product creation? That's a design thinking problem. So a design thinking is suitable under situations where there is a lot of ambiguity, where there's a lot of discovery involved. And hence design thinking is definitely not the go-to approach for any kind of or every kind of a problem. It can be a very specific method, but I think that is where the distinction I would like to draw between design thinking and agile. Any questions on these two charts?
Yeah,
This chart,
Lakshmikant here. I had a question
yes.
over here. So basically, whenever you come across the problems, like, it may not fall in the realm of critical thinking, lateral thinking, because you will have unknown problems and unknown solution. But when you follow the process of design thinking, when you're empathizing, and that stage you come before even you go for prototyping, you're suddenly either your problem would generally be known at that point of what you are trying to attack, and you are going in the ideation phase for solving that problem. Wouldn't that land into either lateral thinking or critical thinking? Like, we moved away from design thinking into one of these zones. I don't know. I'm just thinking
Not
aloud with
necessary. Sure. So let me clarify that. The starting point of design thinking is not the problem. The starting point of design thinking is what we call as a design brief. And design brief is not a problem. So if I go back to the model, if I look at the design brief comes here.
Okay.
This is where you design. And the problem definition comes here. So only after you've empathized with your certain set of audience that you'll be defining the problem. Let me give you a simple example. And it's a classic problem, by the way. So one of the definitions I can have of a problem is, how do we make the lift faster? You must have seen people that they keep pressing the lift button for lift to arrive quickly. And if the problem is defined as how do we make the lift faster, or how do we reduce the waiting time, that's one sort of a problem. To reduce the waiting time, I can straight away go into my lean thinking, which is hastening up the speed of the lift, adding more lifts, making the lifts more intelligent in terms of which floors to stop, which floors not to stop. So that will take me to a different trajectory of solving. But if I go through design thinking and I bring the inspiration can be that how might we reduce the anxiety of the customer? Instead of reducing the waiting time of the customer, I can come up with a very different genre of solutions altogether. So the moment I define the problem as how do I reduce the anxiety of the waiting customer, instead of touching the lift at all, I can still reduce the anxiety by putting an LCD screen where the customer can get entertained, by playing a music, or what we have seen is by putting mirrors inside or outside the lift, or by making the lift as a capsule which has a glass embodiment. So design thinking does not necessarily start with the premise that you know the problem. However, what you need at the start of design thinking is a design brief. And design brief is not the problem. Design brief is the reason why you want to solve a specific problem. And then we allow enough ambiguity, enough latency for the problem to get defined and redefined. Does it address your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Soni, just a quick question here. So you mentioned about design thinking and lean thinking. So
Yes.
Can we understand it as during empathizing and really understanding the user problem, you are in design thinking space, but once it comes to ideate and prototype, you can fall back on the lean thinking because you're actually rapidly iterating towards some solution which you think will help the customer. So you're actually going back and forth between design thinking and lean thinking. Is that
that's a good observation. That's a good observation. So here is what is a very rough mapping. It's a very approximate mapping which I can talk about. Okay, so bear with me on this.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So what I'm suggesting is this is critical thinking. Inspire, empathize, define is critical thinking. This is lateral thinking. This is lean thinking. And put together, this becomes design thinking. And this is where you go for MVP, minimum viable product. A minimum viable product comes from the domain of a lean startup. And the whole premise of an MVP, it can be, P can be anything, by the way. Somebody rightly said it can be an experience, it can be a solution. Product is a shorthand for a solution. So don't think of product as something which is tangible. Product can be anything, absolutely. So design thinking encompasses all of these three elements. You start with critical thinking, then you go to lateral thinking, then you come to lean thinking, and finally all of these encompassed becomes design thinking. That's how you have to look at it. So you first make the problem understandable, then you generate the ideas, and then you finally execute them. Does it make sense?
Yep.
Okay, any other question?
Yeah, so hi Dr. So this is Karthik. So both are related questions, the first question and the second question. So the first question almost comes to the same thing, like whether the once we know the problem, whether it falls back to the lean thinking and it goes back to the agile or the scrum process. So again, my mind is again revolving there, that how come we don't know a problem at all. At one point of time we'll come to a conclusion that this is what the problem is, and then the design thinking is nowhere in the picture, and if we fall back to other processes of lean thinking, is what you're saying.
Okay, so here is my question to all of you. If I go to lean thinking, can any one of you tell me what are the methods of ideation that you use in lean thinking? What are the
You said
ideation methods?
requirement gathering, you mean? I mean ideation, when you say
Ideation is not requirement gathering, no. Ideation is generating ideas to solve a problem. So what are the methods that you use in lean thinking for ideation?
I think typically brainstorming.
Okay, what else?
understanding the problem and
No, you are again going to understanding the problem. My question is very clear and it's an open question. I'm not pinning anyone down here. My question is, in lean thinking, what are the techniques of idea generation that you use?
Could be a value stream mapping.
Okay.
Interviews, customer interviews.
Survey.
That's not for idea generation. No, that's for requirements gathering again.
more of a maybe experience or a system knowledge to get the ideation.
So the point which I want to arrive at is that the lean thinking per se does not give you a bouquet of methods for ideation, which means design thinking is not only to go from not knowing problem to knowing problem. Design thinking is also required to also solving the problem. That's point number one. Point number two, when I say the problem is not known, you might know the symptom. I'll give you a simple example. If you go outside, and I see that quite often, people still do not wear a mask. Simple question. If I define my problem as making people wear mask, then I'm completely wrong here. The way I have to redefine my thing is that how might I encourage people to wear mask? If I do an empathizing exercise, which would completely skip in a lean thinking or agile way of doing things, empathizing, and I start talking to people, then I might come up with this realization. There could be 5 reasons why people do not wear a mask. One is they might not have money to buy a mask. Second is they might feel itching when they wear a mask, breathing difficulty or sweating or itching. Third thing could be that mask distorts their physical looks. Fourth thing could be that they do not believe that there is a coronavirus. And the fifth thing could be that they think that they have enough immunity. Now, unless, and each of these 5 identification of the root causes will take me to different solutions altogether, right? From designing a better mask to providing masks for free to sensitizing people, or to giving them some mask that can take care of their aesthetic needs also. So what I'm suggesting is that instead of short-circuiting the utility of design thinking as only a problem discovery tool, which is a very narrow treatment, design thinking also helps you to generate ideas. In the realm of design thinking, there are at least 10 methods of ideation that we talk about. So that is the utility that we bring to the table.
Okay.
Does it address your question?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Any other question, folks?
So the follow-up thought is, like, somewhere we need to have this design thinking flow when it comes to lean thinking. So maybe we are trying to fit in the design thinking into something which you already know, and maybe that's not correct. So yeah, maybe.
Yeah, glad you admitted that.
Yeah,
glad you admitted that. So don't label yourself as a design thinking practitioner. I think you should label yourself as a thinking practitioner, or not a lean thinking or a design thinking. You are a thinking practitioner, and any method that comes your way, just lap it up. That's all. I'm not at all saying one is better than other. All I'm saying is that in a very complex problem, you are better off to go with a design thinking model than for a problem which is straightforward. That's my only recommendation to you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other question, folks? If none, then let me go to the meat of the program here, Agile and the innovation culture. I'll talk to you about a few very important aspects of how do you really build a culture of innovation within the organization by building on some of the elements of design thinking and some of the elements of agility. So agility at the very core is speed, okay? But at the same time, I would like to throw a spanner at the discussion here, and I would like to see your response. How would you respond to this statement of mine? Okay, I'll be very happy to take up questions on this particular statement. I think that's absolutely important. So the point which I want to make here is that for you to practice creativity, okay, design thinking is nothing but a systematic human-centric method of problem solving. That's about it. That is design thinking. There's no fancy definition beyond that. So if I want to offer you this thing, I'm writing a statement on the chat box. And my request to everybody on the call is that there are 32 people on the call. I would request every of you to write an answer to me, whether you agree with it statement or you do not agree with that. That's all I'm interested in. If you don't agree, then obviously we can take the debate further. But if you agree with, then we can cut losses. Okay, so here's a statement. Okay. Okay, here's a statement which I've made. Just write agree and disagree. That's all. And I would request all 32 of you to respond. I'm saying to think creatively, you must think slow. Think slow and not think fast. Think slow. You have to just write agree or disagree. There is no middle answer. And I'm not making a tentative statement. I'm making a very, very straight statement. For you to be creative, you have to think slow and not think fast. I'm not even saying sometimes. I'm saying always. You have to think slow and not think fast. So if I'm not making a categorical statement, I don't want it. I want a categorical. Not always disagree. So half of you agree, remaining disagree, which is okay. Okay. So anybody who disagrees would like to air your opinion. Why do you disagree?
So Dr. Soni, this is Mayuresh. I disagree with this particular statement because the creativity can come from random ideas. And that random idea could be anything wild. And that wild can be really fast, and that need not to be thought through. So if you are thinking a particular idea, that need not to be well thought through, and then you put up, which will slow down the thinking.
Good point. Very good point. Let me give you a definition of creativity. I think that's very important. Do you think every idea is a creative idea?
No, that is not a creative idea.
Absolutely. So let us start with the definition of creativity. The definition of creativity is an idea which has two qualifiers: utility and novelty. Utility and novelty. While an idea that might come out of spark in your head, which itself is an epiphany, or an accidental idea, it might have a novelty. But to check whether it has utility or not, that is an act of deliberation. Okay, so I think we have a lot of epiphany moment of apple falling on the head of Isaac Newton, and the Eureka moment where Archimedes was running naked on the streets of Athens. All of these are epiphanies, and all these are urban legends. Most of these ideas that come to people come in a very slow hunch fashion. So there's a lot of deliberate thinking and processing that has to go in. Ideas don't come as a light bulb. They come as aberrations, creative aberrations as we call it. Any other person who has disagreed on the statement would like to air?
Yeah, this is Lakshmikant here. So I disagreed because, moment the idea comes and you jot it on, you may have a deliberation on it, but somewhere you made a placeholder for it. And then the deliberation process starts. So even I have had those moments with me where I had some innovative idea and it just happened and I just ran and wrote it down. Once it was written down, it was there in front of me. I could deliberate on top of it and build on top of it. I couldn't just get the whole thing immediately clear. But yeah, that placeholder came up very fast.
It's a good point. Okay. Anybody else? So there are two ways of solving a problem, or actually, if you look at the work of Daniel Kahneman, there are two ways of thinking: system 1 and system 2. The system 1 thinking is fast and furious, and the system 2 thinking is slow and deliberate. And what we try to advocate in the realm of design thinking or in the realm of creative problem solving is that if you have to solve a thorny problem, you have to really, really slow down your thinking. Only when you slow down your thinking, and which is quite against the agile way of thinking, agile means fast. Only when you slow down your thinking are you able to think of the idea in its totality. Let me ask you a simple question. The first idea that comes to your mind about any problem, where does the idea come from? Sources of the first idea of any problem. First idea. Go ahead. You can write on the chat. Go ahead, guys. You can speak also if that is okay. Experience. All right. Puna, your first idea of any problem, where does the idea come from? Subconscious mind, necessity, problem itself. Don't write, Lakshmi, don't need not write to me in private. You can write to everyone. That should be okay. So there are typically three sources of first few ideas: gut feel, past experience, common sense. Gut feel, past experience, common sense. This is where your ideas typically come from. And by definition, none of them is creative. Gut feel is not validated and hence not creative. Common sense is way too common to have any novelty. And past experience mandates or necessitates that this problem is akin to your past problem, which means what has worked in past should also work here. Only when you perceive for your third or the fourth or the fifth idea that you are able to work out. Tell me, I'm just writing a small statement here. Do you think this is a ethos of lean thinking, yes or no? Do you think it's an ethos of agile thinking, right first time? Yes, no? Fantastic. Okay, this is good. So this is equally not the ethos of design thinking. As a matter of fact, the ethos of design thinking is wrong first time. Wrong first time, wrong second time, wrong third time, and maybe wrong the fourth time, and perhaps right the fifth time. So you have to really persist to be wrong and slowing down your thinking. Even in the VUCA economy, I think the idea is to slow down the thinking. And this is what takes us to the first premise of culture, which is listen with intent. So one of the key things that some of the leaders really painstakingly practice is the importance of developing very, very important listening skills. And for me to bring home the point of the criticality of the listening skills, let me straight away jump onto this very fascinating statement by Satya Nadella, where he talks about how he has used some of the principles of design thinking and empathy, more specifically, to transform the culture of Microsoft. So let's hear it out from Satya.
Your first child was born with cerebral palsy. He is now 21 years old. So how did you realize that was going to change your life, and how have you dealt with that issue?
Yeah, even I was 29 years old when Zain, our son, was born, and if you had even asked me maybe even an hour before he was born what was going through my head, it was all about, oh, is the nursery going to be ready? What's going to happen to our weekends now we have a son? And when will Anu, my wife, get back to a job, and so on. But obviously everything changed that night. He was born because of an undetected in utero distress, asphyxiation, with severe brain damage, and that led to cerebral palsy, and he's quadriplegic now.
Are you not able to hear?
The first.
Okay, I think rest can hear. All right.
Yeah,
We can hear. We can hear.
I would say maybe 2 years or more even. I was more about like, why did this happen to me? What happened to us? And all of these plans that I had are now all been thrown up in the air and changed. Whereas Anu, my wife, what came naturally to her as a mother was, she said, okay, I'm not going back to my job. I'm going to really care for my son, drive him around for the, therapy after therapy. And I watched that. Without schooling me, I got schooled. That nothing happened to me. What happened was to my son, and that it was time for me to understand that, realize that, see life through his eyes, and then do my duty as a father. That, to me, perhaps, it didn't come in one moment. It's something that I think took time. But as I figured it out, it changed me, both as obviously a parent, but also who I am today and how I approach everything.
Now, your wife was trained as an architect.
That's right.
And she's given up doing that for a while.
That's right.
Now, you have two daughters. One of your daughters has severe learning disabilities as well. And how did that affect you and your wife?
In fact, one of the things that happened because of our son was we built up a tremendous community of people, whether this was the therapists or other parents with, of children with disabilities. And so we were involved in that community. By the time our youngest daughter came into our lives, I must say we had the richness of this community to support us. And it turned, when we recognized very early on, and Anu and I, and Anu in particular, was very quick to realize that she will need additional help. And so we found this school actually in Vancouver, BC, which was all around neuroplasticity. The idea was you can train your brain to learn, so instead of compensating. And so we decided that, you know what, we're going to move the family to Vancouver. Zane was going to stay with me in Seattle. My daughters and my wife were going to live in Vancouver. We were going to commute again over the weekends. But the thing that all, quite honestly, that is where it came all naturally to us, because in some sense, Zane had taught us what it takes to give people with disabilities the best shot, and so it's something that we took on.
And your son lives with you now.
Yes.
And one of the qualities that you say you got from all this was empathy, and that the result of having empathy made you a better CEO and a better person. Is that fair?
Yeah, in fact, when I look at empathy, and most people think empathy is just something that you reserve, for your life and your family and your friends or what have you. But the reality is, I think it's an existential priority for a business. Because if you look at it, like, what is our business? Our business is to meet unmet, unarticulated needs of customers. There is no way our innovation to meet unmet, unarticulated needs is going to come about if we don't listen, not just listen to the words, but go deep to understand what the needs are behind it. So I think empathy is core to innovation. And life's experience, if you listen and you learn from, teaches you. I wouldn't claim, as I've sort of even talked about it, with any innate capability of empathy that I was born with. If anything, it's life that has taught me. And if anything, my pursuit is every year, is there growing sense of empathy for people around me. So
here's Satya Nadella for you, and he talks about two very, very critical things. Just to paraphrase the video for all of you. The one is that innovation is about understanding the unmet and unarticulated needs of the customer. So I want to underscore the important point, unarticulated, which means that the customer cannot tell you what she wants or he or she wants. The first point. And the second point is that empathy is core to innovation. And how do you develop empathy? You develop empathy by developing very, very deep listening skills. And along the journey, I would also tell you that how empathy can be engineered. So the two distinctions which you can really borrow from design thinking to agile ways of doing things. The first is the importance of empathy. And the second thing is methods of creativity. So these should be the two takeaways that you can possibly have. And then how do you really back it up and build it into your culture of the organization? The second thing is developing a culture of experimentation voraciously. So what I've seen in my own consulting career, and of course my research on innovation and creativity, is that some of the most innovative companies in the world have a base amount of resources given to people always to do a proof of concept. If you really want to have an innovation culture within your teams or organization, you should always allow people to have no questions asked fund to at least do their proof of concept. The legendary 3M has institutionalized this concept called 15% time off way back in 1945, stating this 15% of your paid time to a scientist or an engineer would be given without any questions asked. HP had this policy of labs being open and people allowing to take their instruments back home so that they can work on those things. And in the modern day parlance, you have companies like Intuit and Google. Both of these companies have 20% time off, where employees are allowed to work on 20% of their times on hobby projects. 5 of the things that came out of the 20% time off, as far as Google goes, is AdSense, Google Maps, Orkut, Google News, and then there was one more product that came out of the 20% time off feature. So I think these innovative companies have a no questions asked budget to do a proof of concept. So much so that in companies like Google, there is a phenomena which says that if you have an idea, never take an idea to your supervisor.
Pavan, sorry to interrupt. Even Google Mail or Gmail is at that 20% idea.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. Thank you. So there is a concept that never take an idea to your supervisor. So if you're wondering that why it's a bad idea to take your idea to your supervisor in your organization, even Google swears by that. But in some of these companies, there is a concept called take an idea to your peer community. When you take an idea to your peer, only 2 things can happen. Either they'll butcher your idea, calling it absolutely normal, or they can add on to your idea and make it even more powerful. And once you rally 6 of your colleagues and then you go to your supervisor will not have the courage to dismiss you, because then he or she would not want to look fool in front of 6 people who really believe in that particular idea. So invoking another genius of our current times, we have Jeff Bezos, who has this concept called 2 pizza teams. So deciding the team size also is very critical when it comes to innovation culture. So Jeff Bezos says that we will never have a team smaller than or bigger than 1, which can be fed with 2 pizzas. In Google, there is a concept called let a million flowers blossom, where they never invest into individual projects of individuals. The individual has to rally a team. Only when the team is being built, then they fund. But to go from an idea in your mind to rallying a team around it, whatever fund is required, that fund is given to you in terms of time, resources, network, or sheer money is given to it all times. So let us hear it out from Jeff Bezos on how he builds a culture of innovation within his organization, which is Amazon. And there are 2 very, very important things which I would like you to pick it up from this particular piece here. There we go.
To be innovative, you have to experiment. If you want to have more invention, you need to do more experiments per week, per month, per year, per decade. It's that simple. You cannot invent without experimenting. And here's the other thing about experiments, lots of them fail. If you know it's going to work in advance, it is not an experiment. And what happens in big organizations, Amazon's a big organization now too, the Air Force is a big organization, is that we start to confuse experimentation with operational excellence. So operational excellence is one of our 4 key principles at Amazon. We're building a fulfillment center. We've built over 150 large fulfillment centers around the world now. We know how to do that. That is not an experiment. If we build the 151st fulfillment center and screw it up, that's just a failure. That's not the kind of failure we're seeking. We want failures where we're trying to do something new, untested, never proven. That's a real experiment, and they come in all scale sizes. So you need to teach people that those 2 kinds of failure are different. And you need to have, you said something about that hard middle where ideas don't go up. I think this is such an important thing. At Amazon, one of the things we try to do is have multiple paths to yes. And so here's a little thought experiment for you. If you are a junior executive at Amazon, and if Amazon did this in the typical kind of corporate hierarchy way, you had an idea. You need to get your boss to greenlight that idea, and then your boss's boss needs to greenlight that idea, and then your boss's boss's boss needs to greenlight that idea. There are probably 5 levels or more before that idea gets the go-ahead. Assume instead that you're an entrepreneur with a startup company idea and you need venture capital. You go to Sand Hill Road and you go to the first venture capitalist and they tell you no. And you go to the second one and they tell you no. Maybe your 20th one tells you yes. You got 19 no's and 1 yes, and you're still good to go. So that venture capital model there's multiple paths to yes. There were 20 people who could give you a yes, and it didn't matter how many gave you a no. So if you want innovative thinking, you have to think about how can we you want a large number of high judgment people empowered to greenlight things. You want multiple paths to yes. You want a system where, as a junior Air Force officer with a good idea, the first 5 people tell me no, and somehow I can still go pursue that idea. So you got to figure that's an organizational challenge that big organizations have to figure out a way to do. And by the way, I get, this happens all the time. I'll say I don't think that's a good idea, but somebody else will greenlight it, and I'm fine with that because usually the cost of the experiments is pretty small. Things only get expensive when they work. Right? Once something works, you're like, whoa, we need to double down on that. Now, and then the spending can get heavy, and then those become big consequential decisions, and that's where the hierarchy and using the judgment of the most senior people to me this really helps. Sure. You also have to select people who like to invent. So that's the other, when you're in your hiring and in your promotions process, you need to say, is this person like to be innovative? Do they have a bit of a pioneering spirit? Maybe they're also a little bit annoying because they might be, a little bit radical or a bit of a rebel. They're not always the easiest people to get along with, but you want them in your organization. They may be mavericks.
Let me follow up on that.
They're a spice. Sure. I wouldn't recommend having 90% mavericks.
Exactly.
So that's your Bezos. And there are 2 takeaways which I would like you to focus on here. The first one is the importance of having multiple paths to yes, which is that if your supervisor doesn't agree with your idea, then you should have some other mechanism circumventing your supervisor and going somewhere else. And then the very critical thing is that if you know it's going to work in advance, it's not an experiment. Balaji has just indicated me that I have 15 minutes to wrap it up. Yes, Balaji.
Yeah, Dr. Soni, just very quickly. I mean, a lot of times we keep hearing this word experiment and hypothesis, and of course we do experiments in physics labs when we were in high school. But once we step into an office, we are not familiar with the term experiment. So, what do you think would be 1 or 2 very simple ways of explaining to people what an experiment in a business context looks like?
Okay, it's a good question. So before I talk about what an experiment would be, it's important for you to develop an experimental mindset. And there are 2 important things that we need to bear in mind when you develop an experimental mindset. The first thing is, how do you contain your experiment? What is the boundary condition of an experiment? And that is called as a hypothesis. There is no experiment without a hypothesis. A hypothesis is that I'm going to try out this thing, and this is the desired result which I want to achieve. If I do not achieve the result, I'll call the experiment as a failure. But if I achieve that desired result, I'll call the experiment as a success. Many people start an experiment without a hypothesis or without a priori. Let me give you a simple example of an experiment. I used to consult with a company called Tanishq, and I heard the story in Tanishq. So Tanishq has these big crucibles where they melt gold. And so after a certain amount of time, these crucibles are laid useless because you can't melt gold anymore in these crucibles because the porosity is lost. So what do? They junk these crucibles. And there's a lot of gold still trapped in the crucible. So one of the supervisors in the plant in Hosur, Tamil Nadu, had this very crazy idea that why not crush these crucibles? So instead of spending huge investment in those big crushers that would crush metal, they said that why not use a very simple hack, a simple jugaad, if you will, to test the hypothesis that what was the hypothesis? The hypothesis is, can I crush the crucible to extract gold out of it? There was a hypothesis. How to test the hypothesis in a quick and dirty way? He spent 200 rupees, gave it to his neighbor who had a road roller. He brings a road roller to Hosur factory next day morning, puts a carpet on the road, puts the crucible on the carpet and roads it with a road roller. After 1 or 2 back and forth of road roller, the crucible is smashed. And on that particular day, by rolling the road roller on these crucibles, investment 200 rupees, he recovered 4 kilograms of gold. And you would not believe that henceforth, rolling crucibles with road rollers has become a SOP, standard operating procedure, in the Tanishq factory. Now, there are two takeaways which I would like you to have from this particular exercise. The first and the important thing is having a hypothesis. He didn't simply come with a road roller to the office. His hypothesis was that if I crush crucibles, can I recover gold? He had to prove or disprove the hypothesis, and the cheapest way to do it is to use a road roller. The second thing is he didn't ask for permission. Rather, he was okay for asking for forgiveness, which means that if you really want to develop an experimental mindset, you need to have a thick skin. And most people do not experiment in their life or their job or the offices because they often are so timid to fail or to admit that they have failed that they would rather play safe, because failure or experimentation comes at the cost of your reputation, your personal and your social reputation. So talking about experiment in slides is one thing, but actually going out and experimenting is quite a tricky affair, because experiments do fail. And what happens when the experiments fail? Are you able to move on? And in the world of physics and social sciences and even physical sciences, experiments is the way of progress. And the reason why experiment is the way of progress is because they document the experiments painstakingly, and every experiment starts with a hypothesis. So in your office also, if you think that there is a presentation which is not going good with a client, or there is a proof of concept that is not going properly, you should start with a hypothesis, contain the cost of your failure, and accept the results, whether they are favorable or non-favorable, and move on. And you should have the physical temperament and the personal temperament to withstand some of those things. And psychological safety, of course, a good point, Pradeep, you have brought in. So psychological safety is that people will not be reprimanded if the experiment fails. Okay, so let me do one thing in the benefit of time. We are already past 16:30 hours. So I'll pause here. Of course, we can always chat upon these topics at a later date and time, but I've at least given you some inkling of what is design thinking, what is the parallels with Agile, how some of the principles of Agile and design thinking can be manifested in the form of honing innovation culture. I'll pause here and I can take up maybe 3 or 4 questions in the next 15 minutes. Let me do that instead. Go ahead, please. I'll be happy to take questions.
Yeah, Dr. Soni, maybe I can start.
Yes,
when you speak about culture, where do you think, let's say, rituals and ceremonies, which are strong indications of any culture, play a role in innovation? Is it like recognizing these experimenters, inventors, celebrating failures? Are there good examples of ceremonies or rituals?
Absolutely. It's a very good point. It's a very good question. So Tata Group has a program called Tata Innovista. Tata Innovista was started somewhere in 2006, where they call in all the 100 odd Tata Group companies to participate in this event, where they felicitate innovators. For the first couple of years, they felicitated the winning innovators. But then in the year 2010 or so, they introduced a very unique category of awards called Dare to Try Award. The Dare to Try Award was a category where they felicitated the failed innovations. And it so happened that between the time it was introduced and the next 8 years, the number of participants who applied for Dare to Try Award went up by a whooping 50,000 times. And this is what Tata Group does to celebrate failure. And it also turns out that the people who participate in Dare to Try Award, 70% of those participants next year or year hence are the winners when it comes to successful innovation. So Tata has a practice of celebrating failures. HP has a practice called the Medal of Defiance. It is given to those people. It's a medal, like a Hall of Fame. There is a Medal of Defiance. Medal of Defiance is again a ritual which is given to people who go against the call of duty and still turn out to do something wonderful. So I think organizations, I've given an example of an Indian company and a multinational company where they do that quite a bit. So that's my response. Okay, and please go ahead with your questions. You can ask the questions, unmute yourself.
Lakshmikant, have you heard about this MobiusLoop.com? It seems to have a combination of design thinking followed with agile way of delivering the project itself.
No, I have not. I'll have a look.
please, my invitation to you to have a look at it once.
Sure. Thank you.
Lakshman, what was that? Mobius loop.
Mobius
That's on
loop.
chat. That's on
Okay.
chat.
It's on chat also.
Okay, sorry, I didn't check that. Thank you.
Okay. I made note of that. Go ahead. Any other question, folks?
Yeah, maybe I can ask one more on this experiment and hypothesis. So you said we will contain the kind of magnitude of failure and impact and so on. Are there some thumb rules, or are there some practices which companies have? I mean, is it just ability of risk taking of the company, how much they want to contain, or what would that look like?
So there is a 70-20-10 rule, and the 70-20-10 rule says that 70% of your efforts would go on to your routine objectives, which is what you want to achieve. 20% would go on to the horizon 2, which is doing some bit of value add, which has not been done previously, and no more than 10% of your investments should go into pure experiments. So the 10% experiments that you're trying to bet on would then perhaps result into competing revenue stream. So there are two things that we need to bear in mind. The first thing is we need to have incentive mechanisms for people to take up experiments. And I call them as asymmetric incentive mechanisms. What I mean by asymmetric incentive mechanisms is that if somebody does an experiment is something that you declare before. You cannot call something as experiment if it failed. You have to call it experiment beforehand. It may fail, it may not fail. So that's critical. So the incentive mechanism says that if you are experimenting onto something and if you fail, then you should not be reprimanded severely. But if you succeed, you should be rewarded handsomely. So that is a kind of asymmetric incentive mechanisms that call out. And usually organizations as a heuristics spend no more than 10% of their resources on failures. And it might so happen also that you can separate the teams which are doing routine activities with the teams which are doing some extreme amount of experimentation. Like in the case of Google, they have created this company called Google X, called the moonshot projects. So these are all earmarked people, and the routine projects, which is your roof shots, are not really expected to take such inordinate amount of risks. So you have to separate these type of people who are risk takers and then who are routine, because not everybody is a risk taker after all. So that's something we need to appreciate. So that's my view on this topic.
The term that you used was asymmetric incentive, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
So what I mean by asymmetric incentive is that the rewards and punishments are not symmetric to the efforts.
Yes, I got that.
It comes from, in the psychology, there is a concept which is called as a prospect theory. So prospect theory says that if I lose $100, I'll be more sad than the happiness which I'll get by finding $100. Suppose I find $100 somewhere on the road and I'll pick that up. I'll be happy. But if I lose $100 somewhere on the road, my $100, then the amount of sadness which I will have will be more than the amount of happiness which I'll have. So losses loom larger than gains. It's called prospect theory in psychology. So we apply the same in the space of experimentation. Okay, I can take one last question, and if there is none, then I'll be happy to sign off. I just looked at the website, Mobius. So this is the website.
I mean, in the context of agile world, so did you think the product owners could drive the innovation as part of their day-to-day activities or sprint-on-sprint activities, rather than separate time for innovation alone?
I think the radical innovations can never come up if you do not dedicate separate time, but continuous improvement or incrementalism can always happen on a day-to-day activity. And one person needs to really understand that no amount of incremental innovation can get you to a radical innovation. So I think at a personal level, you need to definitely allocate time to do some radical thinking. It's absolutely impossible for you to be running on the treadmill and trying to achieve continuous improvement on a daily basis, and at the same time assuming that, or sort of pretending that over a period of time things will start looking radical, that's never going to happen. And that's why I'm saying the way companies give one Saturday off or one day in a week off to really do some radical thinking, the same thing applies to individuals also. We need to take time to do radical thinking. And in a continuous improvement fashion, what is required is to have incentives. What I have seen and known is that people do not innovate unless there is an incentive to innovate. We are all slaves of our habits, routines, and our mind loves routines and our mind loves habits. So as long as we are comfortable running the show on the treadmill, unless there is no nudge to change things, change is not going to happen. And some of these methods of problem solving can come handy when it comes to doing radical thinking. But the long story short, people need to take time out exclusively, any amount of time, like 1 week in a quarter. And even for organizations, they need to take that 1 week in a quarter, do an offsite, do some really radical thinking and come back.
Okay.
Otherwise,
On the
routines
contrary,
take over.
Yeah, I'm sorry. On the contrary, I would think that your hypothesis and ideation, these kind of things probably come when you take up additional time, as you suggested, as Google has been doing, 20% of the time allocated. But once that particular ideation is, or hypothesis is potentially achievable, then probably you put that into the mainstream day-to-day regular releases or sprints, just like the way Apple has been born. You have a visionary. You have a visionary who is driving the product, is acting like a product owner.
I didn't understand the last few statements which you made on the contrary piece, when you said that offsite is fine. Then what happened to that second piece?
So all I'm saying is, initially what happens is you allocate separate time, 20% of the time, and they go and experiment. Probably they have some hypothesis in their mind and try to prove. After that, based on that particular idea, where the ideation happened over there, but you have, in order to scale it up and really see the vision that you had to life, or bring it to life, you need that particular person as a visionary or the product owner, acting as the product owner and driving that particular product, as much as Steve Jobs has led his team when they invented Apple's touch screen.
Yes. So to scale it back, you need to bring it back to the context. That's right. The ideation comes from an offsite or out of the context, but to scale them and see the impact, you have to bring it back to the context. I agree with you on that.
Pavan, I have a question. So nowadays, all US MNCs, they start opening their cost centers in India. Instead of, they will call it as delivery centers. Okay. So whichever the revenue they are generating from India cost center, so they will add that revenue to that headquarters. So that they want to get the work in a cheaper manner from India, and they want to get more results to their shares or blah blah blah. So in this scenario, how we can apply 70-20-10 formula, these kind of organizations? How?
It's a very good question.
Yeah,
it's a very good question. It's a very honest question. I must say that. I think we need to prove our capabilities in certain contexts. I'll give you an example of GE. When Jack Welch was the CEO of GE, they came to India on the behest of Rajiv Gandhi, and they started selling GE medical equipments, etc. in India, and they never looked at India as a talent base. Slowly they started with the back office called JACIS, and then a few of the manufacturing facilities. And then the engineers at GE could really upsell the India talent to the GE headquarters, Jack Welch, who was the CEO till 2001. And then they invested and created the John F. Welch Center in India somewhere in 1997. Ditto with Philips. The Philips Innovation Campus is in India. Bosch has a very, very big setup in India. So I think what happens is that the global competence centers, SAP labs, do a phenomenal job. You as an organization need to start showing India not only as a profitable market or as a source of low-end talent, but also somewhere where you can be a center of excellence for certain disease categories or certain product categories. So I think a lot of examples exist of organizations which have managed to upsell, and the onus lies on the India counterpart to show the big picture. And we have a lot of examples. If you look at it, I told you at least a couple, which is Bosch, GE, and Philips has done a phenomenal job in terms of upselling the talent. And in many companies, the centers of excellence globally exist in India, like Novartis. The global drug discovery center of excellence exists in Hyderabad of Novartis, which is, I think, a very, very big deal. There's no other pharma company which has invested so much in the Indian talent. So there are lots of cases, but it requires a lot of intent and to be able to position yourself in that manner. And the onus is yours. So take a small project, demonstrate it to your head office that yes, we can do beyond the call of duty, invite more resources, develop a team, and slowly you might realize that they might start investing more in India. And we have seen that happening in other organizations.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sure.
Dr. Soni, this is Lakshmikant here again.
Let's keep this the last question because I have
it's
last
not,
question, please.
It's not actually not a question. So everybody has got one of the best videos that they would have presented about on their expertise. So in the public forum, and it's generally available on YouTube or somewhere. So what would be your best talk on innovation culture that you would have put around? So after this session, we could actually go ahead and hear it out.
On innovation culture.
Innovation topic. This what you spoke about today. Innovation culture and tenets and all the stuff.
Yeah. So I think I would like to talk about one talk. Yeah. So this can be there's a talk called the idea supply chain.
Idea supply chain. Okay.
I'll just paste that in the chat. Okay. Just hold on for a moment. I'll paste it in the chat.
I think the chats will go away. Maybe you can send it to Shriyarsha. He'll share with all of us.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right.
Absolutely. I can do that. Sorry, any more questions? Anybody? No? Okay. I mean, the topic is such that it can go on and on. Considering the kind of participation we had this afternoon, it was great, tremendous, and of course, how honored and how fortunate we are to have heard Dr. Soni's touch upon different aspects. Especially, I personally liked the Satya Nadella video on empathy curve to innovate, and of course, Jeff's fostering innovation in terms of pioneer. You should have that pioneering spirit and those kind of things. And most important thing is better say sorry than seek permission. That is something which I really love, that the phrase there. And a big thank you to Dr. Pavan Soni. It was really enlightening. And of course, like me, another 33 people who were on this call would have had some kind of a light bulb moment for themselves, so that they can go back to their groups, colleagues, whoever they're associated with, and try and spread the news. And of course, we will have more sessions like these coming up. Dr. Soni, without your permission, I did paste your LinkedIn URL profile on chat. Sorry about that.
No, it's absolutely fine.
Okay, so feel free to connect with Dr. Soni, and of course, if you have any more questions or anything, you can take it up with him, or possibly channelize it through me, or whatever you guys feel comfortable with. And if last but not least, if you think that you will also want to have a talk as a speaker, we are more than happy to provide that platform to you. As I can show you, you can see on the screen, we are connected on all sorts of social media channels. This recording, if you have missed any bits and pieces because of network issues, don't worry. I'm going to put this up on YouTube. Share the link with all the attendees who attended this program today, or this session today. You guys can go back, replay, and understand. If there are any questions, obviously Dr. Soni is there on LinkedIn to help you. Otherwise, if you want to join any kind of WhatsApp groups or APGI Telegram groups, you have the numbers here, which I've put here. You can please feel free to ping one of us. We will ensure that you will be enrolled into those WhatsApp or Telegram groups for us to keep these, innovation culture and agile awareness going on a continuous cadence. Any last minute thoughts before we call it there? Anybody?
Awesome.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lakshmikant. Okay, if there is nothing, then I would like to say thank you again for spending your 1.5 hours on a Sunday afternoon. Really appreciate your time, and stay safe. Corona is still around, so please stay safe, wear masks, and I'll see you soon. We still have a few webinar series coming up. Please stay in touch on UVCT. We'll host all the sessions on UVCT. One possible next one will be on the 27th of this month, which is again a Sunday. So please look forward to that session. And yeah, I'll see you guys there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. It was a wonderful session. Thank you.
Wonderful.
And
Thanks. Yeah, very, very good session.
very enlightening, very informative. Thank you. Thank you.
And really, I appreciated about the different ideas we have got for like fostering experimental mindset.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.